Hello, and welcome to God Pods, Faith Conversation podcast brought to you by the Church in the 21st Century Center at Boston College. My name is Lynn Baradelli, and I am the Associate Director of the Center and Managing Editor of C21 Resources, a complimentary magazine which offers a compilation of articles on key challenges facing the Church today. This episode, How to Be Builders of Peace, is a continuation of the How to Be Attentive, Reflective, and Loving Conversation series. In it, Joshua Snyder, Associate Professor of the Practice in Theological Ethics at Boston College and guest editor of the C21 Resources issue, Reconciliation, Healing Hearts, speaks with two 2026 graduates of Boston College on their experiences at the Sant'Egidio International Meeting for Peace in Paris. Julia Franco is an international studies major with a concentration in cooperation and conflict. Nelson Tejera de Pedra majors in both theology and political science. Julia and Nelson are also pursuing minors in the Faith, Peace, and Justice program directed by Professor Snyder. Enjoy the podcast.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming and for supporting our two wonderful student speakers who we have here today. I've had the privilege of knowing both Julia and Nelson since they were first-year students, and they've been intimately involved in the Faith, Peace, and Justice program, and they were also involved in the 38th annual Sant'Egidio Meeting for Peace that occurred last fall in Paris. I'd like to give a special shout out to Peter Martin, who's in the crowd, who organized that event for our students and is also organizing it again this year. So it's a wonderful opportunity that we're able to provide here at Boston College to allow our students to be part of an international interfaith delegation that looks at the role of religious communities in building peace and how peace through dialogue is possible. So for today in our conversation, we're going to hear from Nelson and Julia a little bit about their experiences there, and then I'm going to ask them a little harder sets of questions. But we'll begin it nice and easy, allow them to reflect on their experiences. So again, thank you so much for being here, and we'll certainly leave time for questions. So please, as you're joining us today, think of things you might want to ask either Julia or Nelson as we go forward. So my first two questions are for the both of you, so you can take your time on this. And it would be, would you be willing to share a little bit about your experience at the 38th annual Sant'Egidio Meeting and Prayer for Peace in Paris last fall? So just tell us a little bit about the experience, what you gained from it, and then we'll get more into the peace building stuff later. But just give us an overall of your experience, please.
I loved it. It was a great experience. But I think the best day, I would say, would be the last day, where you've gone to all these panels, you've heard all of these incredible people speak, even disagree with each other in a fantastic way. And we were marching after each religious group had their own service. They all met in front of the Notre Dame Cathedral, and we were all walking through the streets. And Julia always laughs that I shed a tear walking among all these cardinals, because I was not supposed to be there, but this just happened that way because they shoved us all out of this church and put us out there. And then we had a great ceremony at the end where all these faith leaders from all over the world committed to reconciliation, committed to pushing efforts for peace, because as we know, so many conflicts in the world are faith-induced. They are conflicts that have roots in faith, unfortunately. And then it started raining, and we all started hugging it out under the rain, and everybody wishing each other peace in their own language. And I think that was also a great moment. There were a lot of moments that were very symbolic of what we were trying to achieve. But I'll show my cards for the talk today. There was a quote from Nelson Moura, who worked in Mozambique to end a very long civil war over there. He works with Sant'Egidio now, and he said a quote during one of the panels. He said, wars don't start with guns, they start with words. So wars need to end with words, not with guns. So I think that that would summarize my experience, Julia.
Thank you, Nelson. I love how you bring up that moment, because that really was one of the funniest memories. Seeing the tear glisten down your face was beautiful. Yeah, I also second what you said. I think that moment during the final ceremony where we all were wishing each other peace in different languages was really beautiful. That also is a highlight for me. If I also look back on my experience as a whole, I think I learned a lot through the forums and through opportunities for relationship building, which isn't quite what I was expecting. I had, for one example, I went to a human rights forum. I think I was on my own, and it was really cool. The different forums were set up in different areas of Paris, and so you kind of just signed up for them, and then you went. And for this forum in particular, I was the only one from our cohort that signed up for it. And it was a beautiful forum in a church on human rights. And I sat next to this guy, and we just started talking. And he is a Hazara Afghani refugee who is living in Germany and doing incredible work with Schools for Peace, so kind of working with children. That I think is also through Sant'Egidio. And we actually just really became good friends. And, we would try to get coffee and food later, kind of throughout the week. We would exchange kind of our favorite music, and also I'm from Texas, so I tried to teach him what a Texas accent was like, and that was really funny. But we actually still keep in touch, and he now moved to Australia. But it's a really beautiful thing that I was able to build relationships that last at a conference like this. And unfortunately, we called a lot last spring because he was struggling with a lot of immigration discrimination happening in Germany at this time that we see all over Europe, but also in the United States. And so that's part of why he had to move to Australia. And that also brings me into a really interesting immigration forum that I went to, with a lot of European delegates talking about the future of immigration policy, what's missing and what needs to be done. And I thought it was really beautiful that a lot of them called for a reckoning with ethno-nationalism, that a lot of the debates about immigration and the criticism with immigration sure is infrastructural based. Sure, there's some systemic issues with how we are processing immigrants, all over the world. But also it's kind of this ideological realm of we have to decide how to build a society where immigrants are included. And what does that society look like? Rather than sending them back to where they came from, which is oftentimes very violent areas, we have to, what is our world going to look like? What is our country going to look like with immigrants included? And so that was a really beautiful talk, very uplifting, that I think is still very relevant today, I think even more so. I also got to meet Nelson Moda. He was really great. He worked with Sant'Egidio with peace building during the Mozambican Civil War. And I just really love, he had to say that the Sant'Egidio community, even though far-reaching and a complex network of, Sant'Egidio has different hubs all over the world. And so it's really broad-based, but the work that they do is very grassroots in each of the countries that they're based in. And so he just kind of said that it's a giant family. And I think that you don't hear that a lot when it comes to international relations and, trust building all over the world. So that was also very uplifting. Finally, I'll just say I learned about track 1.2 diplomacy. So Sant'Egidio works between civil society and governments to see how they can have kind of points of common ground, but also to kind of see where the governments are failing to meet civil society needs and where civil society can have more inclusion in government decision-making. So that was also really interesting, and I'm looking out for other organizations like Sant'Egidio to collaborate with in the future.
Thank you both so much. That was wonderful. So given that you're both faith, peace, and justice minors, and you've had this opportunity to be part of Sant'Egidio, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your understanding of what peace building and reconciliation mean to you in general. So that's kind of a little softball question. But then my difficult one is, given your faith, peace, and justice minors, what's the role of faith-based organizations and interfaith cooperation in peace building? So again, twofold. How would you just define peace building and reconciliation in your own words and what it means to you? And then secondly, what do you see as the interfaith dimension of that?
If I am to define, at least in my own words, I think these complex subjects, so many people have their own sort of definitions. For example, I took a really great class here at PC on forgiveness. The class is just called forgiveness because you got to spend an entire semester talking about forgiveness, and you never get to the end of it. For me, peace building, I don't think that you're truly at peace until you've solved the nature of the issue. One of the panels that I went to in Paris centered around poverty. I'm of the belief that poverty is a form of violence. As long as poverty persists, that you're not at peace, that is a continuation of a form of violence. Peace building, to work towards peace, to work towards eliminating what is that source of that conflict. And it can be very easy to limit the idea of conflict to, party A and party B shooting at each other. But it's a lot deeper than that. You really have to consider, well, what does violence mean to you? Now, reconciliation, I would say, is bringing an end to whatever has happened, be it an actual conflict or a apartheid system or poverty of some sort. And now you have to reconcile one group with a larger group or many groups with each other. You have to allow people to almost reassimilate, because those experiences are very othering. There's always going to be a mentality of a winner or loser, and sometimes people are both parties will think that they were the winners. So now we also need to reconciliate that as well. It's very complicated. And it can be easy to dismiss something like Sant'Egidio as pointless in getting to these aims, because why are a bunch of faith leaders sitting around in Paris talking when people in several places, tens of places in the world are actively shooting at each other? What are we getting at here? But I think that is up for discussion later as well. Now, what does this have to do with faith, peace, and justice? The beauty of faith, peace, and justice is that it's interdisciplinary. And the nature of solving these issues is interdisciplinary. You need people from all over the place. You need lawyers, you need scientists, you need economists, you need diplomats, you need people who will be able to, you need social workers, you need doctors, you need people from all walks of life to handle the different aspects of these situations. So that's one thing that Faith, Peace, and Justice does very well, is bring in folks from all different kinds of majors and say, well, what can I do with my major to set the world aflame? What can I do with my major to go on and be the Magus, be the more, live out these Jesuit values that we have here at BC? Another great thing about FPJ that we have towards this mission is that you are allowed to think on your own terms and really figure out what it is that your mission is, and then now go write about it. Now go learn about it, because all seniors before they graduate have to write a thesis. So now go do your own research, almost a scholar of the college style research. Go what really makes your heart burn in such a way that now you've figured out what it is that you do well, what it is that you want to do in this world, and go learn about it. Go at your own pace, of course, within a semester and under supervision, but and Professor Snyder and I are in the process of figuring that out. Next semester, I will be giving him my thesis paper. So, Julia?
Thank you, Nelson. Once again, I feel like I'm going to be repeating you a little bit. We learned from the same person, so makes sense. I think it's funny. This is supposed to be an easy question because it's a pretty hard one. What is peace building and reconciliation? I also, kind of to sum up what you said as well, I think it's multi-temporal and multi-scalar, all happening at once. And so that kind of yields itself to be a very complex issue and process. So when I mean multi-temporal, we're talking about conflict prevention, crisis management, and post-conflict reconciliation. So that is all happening on a timeline of intersectional histories, philosophies, politics. And so that's something that is very, I think also what's really important to not attack, I don't like that word, but to address the complexity of peace building and reconciliation is to have creativity to pick apart these connections, but also to see how they connect. So it takes a lot of creativity and moral imagination. And my view of also, well, I'll just say, when I say multi-scalar too, it's grassroots, community level, national level, international level, different sectors, public sector, private sector. So talk about a combination of pretty much everything you can think of goes into what peace building and reconciliation is and how it happens. My view, I know we talk about reconciliation as right relationship. So oftentimes when violence has occurred, a relationship has been violated between two people. And in some way or another, needs have not been met. And I think that in my view, if a conflict has happened, it's not returning back to the pre-state of before that conflict occurred, because, well, there was something that happened before that conflict that caused that conflict to occur. I love the word transformation. And so it's a transformation of relationships, not necessarily return to the way things were before. So that's a really important distinction that I like to hold on to. And again, this transformation is where a lot of creativity comes in. As for the role of faith-based organizations, so I had the honor and privilege of being in New York City this week during the UN General Assembly, working with Foreign Policy Magazine on different forums. So I was interning for Foreign Policy Magazine during the summer and wiggled my way into volunteering for them this week, and it was an amazing experience. And I was really especially happy to be viewing a forum and listening to a forum yesterday that was about the role of faith-based organizations in peace building. So I was like, this is perfect. So I'm going to reference actually some of the things that I learned from them yesterday. And so first, kind of like you alluded to with faith being a faith-induced violence, I thought that was a really interesting term. I kind of want to myth bust something here. So religion, I think, is a tool that can be interpreted and used to cause violence. But a lot of people think, especially modernist thinkers, think that religion causes violence directly. But I kind of think, similar to AI, I think it's a dual-use tool. So it can be used for good, it can be used for bad. And so I kind of just want to put that as my foundation, because a lot of people write religion off. I mean, it causes a lot of harm. That is definitely true, but it can also cause a lot of good. So I think keeping that in mind as, the conversation goes forward. And so religion, is not obsolete. It's not irrelevant. It's actually a big tool. Heard a statistic yesterday that said that 85% of the world population subscribes to a religion. And so just in and of itself, religions are a huge driver of the human population, a huge force for trust building, for community building, that I think is an opportunity that, for spaces that are not tied with the government, that are not tied with kind of certain sectors that may come with their own pros and cons, but can directly influence grassroots communities. For example, it's really interesting. I heard from two leaders from the Muslim Charity and the World Congress of Muslim Philanthropists, and they talked about how the unique role that faith-based organizations play in generating resources, advocacy, and leveraging donors. So a lot of you probably know, but one of the pillars of Islam is zakat, which is giving, I think, 2.5% of their income for donations and charity. I never really, I learned that. I remember in my Islam and Christianity and dialogue class here at BC, and I was like, oh, that's amazing, but I never really thought about where that money goes. So it goes to a lot of Muslim philanthropy organizations that I heard from yesterday. And it was really cool to hear them talk about how these kind of donations fill a huge need, that as not only in the U.S., but all around the world, aid is being cut. These kind of donations from religious folks who, have charity and human rights work built into their religion is really providing a lot of opportunity in material funds for different crises all around the world. So that was fascinating to hear. Also, I was not expecting to hear about this, but faith-based organizations are essential for unlocking trafficking and modern slavery. I don't know much about this, but from what they told me yesterday, victims turn to mosques, churches, synagogues when they're in the process of experiencing a crisis or feeling unsafe due to trafficking and concerns. So they have an ability, these faith-based organizations, to react in real time quickly to provide to fulfill the needs of populations, especially vulnerable populations, when they need it most. They lack a bureaucracy that a lot of NGOs or IOs have that provides like an opportunity for them to truly kind of meet the needs of people as they're showing up. And additionally, not just on the grassroots level, but they also create sophisticated networks globally. So there was one example, there was an earthquake in Nepal, I think, a few years ago. And one, I think it was Caritas Internationalis, was there, but they were immediately able to get funds and resources, food, funding for housing to those people in Nepal because there was a network of Caritas Internationalis hubs all over the world, similar to Sant'Egidio. So that was really fascinating to see that it actually has real material impact, not just spiritual impact. What that spiritual impact is, though, I think, is bringing soul back into politics, which I think is, I wonder if we all kind of crave in some way, and I think helps people live up to the ideals of humanitarianism. It is an ideal. It's not always achievable, but I think it is a huge driving force that kind of reroots people in our common humanity. And I think it was really beautiful to see the interfaith aspect of that, and that is really central, that humanity was central among all the interfaith leaders. But now I've talked a lot, so I'll stop talking. But great question.
Thank you both so much. That was truly wonderful. And kind of just thinking about what you both said, there was quite a bit of overlap, the importance of looking at the root causes of conflict, the role of de-escalation, mitigation, and transformation as key three movements within peace building, the restoration of relationships. And I think both of you really highlighted the way in which religion can either inhibit or disinhibit violence, right? That violence and engaging in violence exists on a spectrum. And there are ways in which religion can either inhibit that so that we can use religion in a way that leads to human flourishing as well as it can disinhibit violence, right? Make us more prone to that. So I think those were really great insights that both of you brought up. So we're going to kind of move now. I have a specific question for each of you, right? So we'll, again, Nelson, you can get us started. As you heard in the biographical introduction to Nelson, he's interested in both politics and theology. So I want you to, and I've had the honor of having Nelson in class a few times, and we've had these conversations about the role of forgiveness in political reconciliation. So given your interest in politics and theology, what do you see as the relationship between forgiveness, either interpersonal or forgiveness that's promoted at the political level, and its role in post-conflict contexts? Is it something that ought to be promoted? Is it contextual? Any ideas that you would like to offer, I'd love to hear more about. So thinking about, forgiveness in relationship to reconciliation, bridging theology and politics. Okay, so Professor and I have had quite a few lengthy conversations about this. He knows how I feel about many of these things. Regarding forgiveness and reconciliation, I'm of the belief, I've expressed this to Professor Snyder, that to reconcile with a person is harder to do than it is to reconcile a group. To forgive with a person, to forgive another individual, is easier to do than it is to do with groups, because there's this nameless perpetrator there. Who do I forgive? Just you, Group X in general. That's a hard ask. If I have a name, I can forgive John Smith. I don't know how I can forgive an entire army.
I don't know how I can forgive an entire country. Where do I start with that? So there's that. Of course, the big case study of miracle work is South Africa, post-apartheid, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Fantastic work. This is always the gold standard. I haven't been shy of criticizing it a little bit, specifically in terms of the faith aspect. Yes, I am a Catholic myself. I don't want to paint myself as not, but I do feel like there was a certain, all right, folks, let's just get along for the sake of reconciliation, which may or may not be a hot take, but South Africa is a religiously diverse country. It is a diverse country in any way that you want to cut it. And I think that was very difficult, but also there is a certain aspect of governance that requires, all right, folks, let's get along, which there is a little bit of a, not disrespect, but disregard for the individual. But when you have to move swaths of people in one direction that is beneficial for everyone, it is inevitable that some people may be left behind. Then we need to adapt and take care of those people afterwards. But you need to take steps, in a sense. Let's not let let's not let idealism get in the way of progress, is something I've always heard, which make of that what you will, but it can be very easy to hold off on something just because, well, what about this small group? It's like, yes, but we can take care of them later, which is a hard reality, but these are hard situations that you have to make tough decisions with. So part of that is navigating that. So this is where the theology part comes in, because now you need an ethic within you to go about that. A lot of people ask me, like, oh, especially folks who have no religious education background whatsoever. Oh, you study theology, so like Bible study. That's not the case at all. Yes, I read scripture for class, sure, on occasion. I would really more classify it, at least the classes that I've chosen, as more ethics, is how I would classify it. I would put it somewhere. I'd say take philosophy, now give it an injection of Thomas Aquinas and St. Augustine, and then slap it with ethics. Now you have theology at BC, and it's beautiful. I love it. So if you take those two things, you take almost the coldness that is political science. You have to be a little cold, and you give it that compassion of theology. I think you have a really great cocktail there for doing the work that faith, peace, and justice requires. So I think that I've crafted that together in a way that, at least to me, makes sense. And remind me the other part of your question. Right now. All right.
All right, Julia, I have a slightly different question for you. Given your, I would say, really extensive experience with not just Sant'Egidio, you had also mentioned the UN General Assembly. You've had other international opportunities to be parts of peace gatherings. Last week, we were part of a peace forum for a democratic committee. So all of these like gatherings and forums, and this might sound like Nelson's cold element he was mentioning just before. Do you see these as having an actual cash value? Or put it another way, are these merely performative? Or in gathering with Sant'Egidio interfaith community, being at the UN and learning and observing, being part of a peace forum in a very local context, what do you see as the significance of these activities?
Thank you so much for this question. This is a really timely and important question. And as much as I am at my core a believer in collaboration and in the space that these conferences can provide, I really want to give voice to the frustration and sometimes the performative aspect, like you're talking about, that is associated with these conferences. So, yeah, I just want to give some space for that. Like you said, I was just grateful enough to get to be not quite at the UN General Assembly, but at some side events that were associated with the Assembly. And I mean, just from, I don't know if you know how you guys think, it's a lot of news coming out of there, so I also am not keeping up with it completely. But I just kind of wanted to do even just like a recap of all the different confusion, and not all of it, some of the confusion and frustration that comes out of conferences by looking at UNGA this past week. So on one hand, I heard from people kind of saying that it's not the UN Charter that has failed, but it's its member states that have been failing. And I think that is a really interesting point. Like constructivism and IR tells us, norms will only be upheld if they're reinforced by the actors who are associated with those norms. And I do believe in that. But I also heard a really interesting forum that even the UN Charter itself, the very founding of the UN, was extremely exclusive. So in 1945, only 2 African countries were able to be included in the founding of the UN Charter. And the Pan-African Congress was also established later that year in the fall of 1945, but we don't see many people celebrating that. So that can also, as we go on, and as organizations like the UN, conferences like the UNGA kind of celebrate people debate whether it was really a celebration, observe the 80th year, I think that those we see how the legacy of those conferences has played out against kind of neocolonialism. So I think that's an important thing to recognize. Another thing I think is the kind of dizzying mixed messages that we got from President Trump during UNGA. So I think I've heard, and I have to fact check myself here, but as of 2025, the U.S. has not contributed its promised amount of funding to the UN. As well as in 2024, they did not fully pay the amount of money that they promised they would pay to the UN. So a lot of kind of pressure going into the UN General Assembly about where does the US stand? Does the US still buy into the UN? Is it still going to support the UN? And while, Trump on one hand told Antonio Gutierrez that, the US is still committed to the UN, on the other hand, his hour-long speech recognized or kind of said that the UN was a bunch of empty words. He also is now, I think, opening an investigation into alleged sabotage because the escalator broke down and because the teleprompter didn't work. I think all these messages can be really, to us at least, and I don't want to project how you're feeling, and I'd love to hear this in the questions, but it can kind of feel like a lot of power politics and a lot of what good is happening here. It can feel like performance. And it maybe with those mixed messages, it's difficult to say what really good is coming out of it. However, I do believe in the opportunities that the conferences can create, and that we need to have some forms of international forums for people to engage in dialogue. So while the news kind of projects a lot of, for better or worse, drama with kind of global politicians, I got to see on the ground and on the sidelines and behind the scenes a lot of really important diplomacy going on. So between different sectors, between smaller players, amazing businesses, nonprofits, NGOs, philanthropies, working together, finding ways to collaborate with kind of shared challenges that we're all facing. And I think that is really, that is happening on the ground. We don't really hear about it if we're not there, but I do have a lot of faith in that. And so I'm also seeing really interestingly a lot of talk about the unique role that the Global South can play as the US is kind of withdrawing itself as the unipolar power. There's a lot of excitement about youth in Africa, Latin America, and Asia, about the opportunities that they have to be agents, not just victims. And I think that is a really hopeful thing that is coming out of these conferences, and for a lot of grassroots work to be connected. And I just see that. I got to see it with my own eyes, and I really want to share that with all of you because I don't think that that's being shared in the news. So, yeah.
Thank you both for wonderful, thoughtful responses to those questions. Really appreciate the insights that both of you had to give to our group. So kind of one concluding question I have, and this is directed towards both of you again. Seeing that you're seniors, right? This is the last family weekend that you're going to have. And moving on beyond the hallowed halls of Boston College, What are ways in which you feel that you're going to be able to continue to promote peace building, and reconciliation as you move out into the world, into your chosen careers? Maybe give us a glimpse of things you're interested in, where you see this going.
So as you can see, Julia talks a lot more about the global and I talk a lot more about the domestic, and that kind of checks out. I'm a career public servant. I've been working for the government for a couple of years now, and I've started early and I don't intend to stop. I am who I am. I love what I do, and I'm pre-law, so I intend to go to law school. I'm going to take some time between undergrad and law school, get my things right. It's a packed senior year, so I will say that to focus on all of this plus LSATs and law school labs is I don't know if I can take it. I'm also just not built for K through JD, so there's that. That being said, though, my intention is to be a prosecutor, and that is a controversial take among some because of, especially among the prison abolition movement, which I completely understand. That said, I know where I'm from, and I know what fentanyl does to people. I know what organized crime does to people. I folks who are, for example, addicts to drugs are victims of a crime and victims of an illness. They are not the folks who need prosecuting. What I really want to do is go after RICO cases, go become a federal prosecutor eventually, and go after major players who are causing harm in our streets. That is a conflict in itself. That is a conflict that we are seeing every day. That also leads to a lot of other things, a lot of homicides, a lot of conflicts within groups in our cities. All of that, I think that I have a role to play in that. That's not to discount the roles that other folks play. All of us need to work together. I just know what my piece on the chessboard is, and I hope that the other pieces will come and join me. I have a friend who is really considering becoming a social worker. It's like, please, we need you. We need folks like you because I can't operate alone. So in that space, that's my mission, and that's what I intend to take from BC is how can I make my city look better? And whether that be whether I stay in Boston or I end up in New York or Chicago, frankly, I'll go wherever I'm most needed. So just take a look at crime statistics. Wherever's the highest, I'll be there, right? So wherever that ends up being, my main focus is going to be, well, one, how do we improve people's lives? And even if that's me doing that sounds a little contradictory. You're putting someone in jail whose life are you making better? Well, it's like, if this guy is distributing to 100 distributors who then distribute to thousands of people, if we're cutting this off and now we have a team that can also help people rehabilitate from this vicious illness, well, yeah, we're helping thousands of people in a very indirect way. And that's how a lot of these changes happen. That's how it has to happen. You need people who are going to be in the front lines, and you need people who are going to be higher up. It's the nature of it. So that said, we'll see where this goes. And I'm not done with BC yet. Not done learning yet. You're never done learning, not till you're in the grave. But I'm very grateful for what BC has given me. BC has not just given me a degree, not yet. They will, hopefully, we're getting there. But BC has not just given me an education, but it has given me a way of how to live, a way of how to see myself and how to situate myself in the world and what my mission is.
Man, I'm inspired. I'm going to check in with you in a few, maybe a decade. I'll give you a decade to get all that done. Thank you for this question. This is definitely, as seniors, I know a lot of us are thinking about this. As much as I study international relations, I'm really looking forward to beginning my career on the grassroots level. And even now, while at BC, I do believe kind of coupling my broad definition of violence, that violence kind of can be in many different forms and on many different levels, I then counteract that with a broad definition of peace. And I want to practice it in my interpersonal relationships, how I talk to strangers, how I talk to loved ones, how I talk to myself, and how nonviolent communication be weaved throughout kind of everything that I do. I'm a huge believer in that. So I want to keep working on that element. Everything, whether it be peace building or conflict transformation, it starts from you, it starts from the individual. So I want to keep building that up personally and interpersonally. I think all the stuff that I've learned here at BC, whether it's kind of in South Africa, I was also studying in Croatia, through the conferences, through the classes, I've learned about just how important it is, and I think from a social justice standpoint as well, to be working from the bottom up. There's a lot of top-down solution making, the trickle-down effect that is causing a lot of harm, and it's missing the point. And so I'm really excited and hopeful to work especially with uplifting voices in the global South. I would love to, get as much international experience as I can and, work with them, not as, because I think, again, the story goes, or the narrative has gone, that, the West is going to help these people, but that can be very, kind of get into the realm of white saviorism. And I think more and more we need to move away from that and realize that these local populations have solutions. They know what they need. They know it more than I'll ever know. But getting them the resources, the support that they need, that would be, I think, an incredible job to have one day. So I really hope to be working from the bottom up and with that kind of developing technical as well as really empathetic leadership again, just to uplift the voices that need to be heard and empowered. So looking forward to it.
Thank you both for this robust conversation. And I really love how this final question shows the levels in which we can think about peace building and reconciliation, right? Nelson kind of talks about systems-based advocacy. How do you work within systems to try to reform and promote justice? Julia, you were really highlighting the importance of grassroots and popular movements. Pope Francis, before he passed away, really committed to this idea of collaboration between popular movements to really address the problems that are facing us globally. And I think both of you also highlighted, thinking about violence, it's not just interpersonal, it's also structural as well as cultural, and how all three of those levels need responses. So I think we've gotten a lot of great insights from both of you as you've reflected on this and how you've shared your experiences with us in C21 Resources. As we wrap up, I'd like to thank Julia and Nelson again for their thoughtful comments. I'd like to thank C21 for the opportunity to have two of our student voices highlighted, and thank especially Espresso Your Faith Week for this wonderful time. And one more time, Peter Martin, I'd like to thank you for providing this opportunity for our students to have wonderful experiences like this. So thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of God Pods. For more faith resources, visit our website at bc.edu/C21 or find us on social media at C21 Center.